Hi, this video is inspired by a failed experiment I did with coconut oil last week. I tried putting a teaspoon of coconut oil in my coffee and I experienced really uncomfortable symptoms. So I started having heart palpitations, and then I felt really anxious, and then a really intense brain fog set in, and I hadn't experienced brain fog since I started this diet. So that was pretty intense, and I knew exactly why it happened because coconut oil was the only thing I had added into my diet. And this made me think about years of brain fog I lived with and how it was explained away as a symptom of depression, and then by another doctor as a symptom of anxiety. That was my most concrete and most persistent, and I would say my most disabling symptom. So my doctor in Toronto, every time I went to him with this brain fog complaint, and he always said, well, you know, in depression, the brain doesn't work well, and brain fog and fatigue and inability to think straight and these things, attention problems, are also symptoms of depression. So his strategy was to either increase my dose, so these were applied at different times. So we tried increasing the dose of my medication. It never worked. We added booster medications, never worked. So now I know that it was never going to work because my brain fog was not caused by the so-called depression. Doctors really treat this as like, oh, you have depression, so yeah, your brain fog is caused by that. But in fact, depression in itself is just a symptom of your brain being dysfunctional. So yeah, that's just really frustrating. Just thinking back on all these years I wasted. The biggest thing that actually contributed to me losing those years was the conviction with which doctors speak when they give these diagnoses. So when the doctor tells you, oh, brain fog is a symptom of depression and you have depression, and the treatment of depression is, or the best treatment of depression, or the first line treatment of depression is this medication. So that's exactly what made me lose all these years, and that's exactly what made me not search for alternative answers sooner. I realize now that I had such a strong faith in the medical system, the doctors, and the doctors' practices being based in hard science. But that made me lose so many years, and that's the reason I'm filming these videos, because there is just a fire in me that I can't ignore. So the authority that their convictions carry is a big issue. And that's the reason why I keep coming back to this theme of how the medical system failed me. 10, 11 years of going to different doctors, 4 years of going to the same doctor consistently and regularly, and like, you know, he knew me closely, but food sensitivities or my diet, anything like that, never ever came up. And it could never come up. That's the problem. So because of the way he explained things to me, because of the way he explained depression, and because of the way he described it as some solid diagnosis that we can treat with medication, so I put all my eggs in that basket pretty much. So I was just trying to treat my depression using all the tools that my doctor was offering me, but I was just left frustrated. Like, why is my depression so persistent? I'm doing everything the science says, I'm doing everything my doctor says, and I'm not seeing any progress. So that was really, really frustrating. I know now, yeah, like the medication was never going to work for me, and it was never going to work for my symptoms. And I took these medications for years without seeing any relief, and just getting constant side effects from them because it just wasn't the right treatment for what I had. The other issue is that like medications are offered by these doctors with so little concern, the way they're just prescribed. So when you're getting these medications prescribed, you really don't understand the things that could go wrong, the side effects that you could experience, and then if you ever wanted to stop them, how difficult it will be. So they don't give you a good picture of how big of a commitment medication is, even if it was actually treating my depression. I never had this understanding of how much side effects I was going to get from them, how difficult it was going to be to keep trying different medications, and then how difficult it was going to be to switch to another medication, that transition period. And then if I wanted to stop them, how horrifying it was going to be. So they definitely downplay it. So this being downplayed by the doctors, I just think this is unethical. So I'm thinking back on all the side effects I had, all the horrible side effects I had, from being restless to not being able to sleep to sexual dysfunction, and irritability. Some medications made me incredibly angry, and it caused a lot of relationship problems as well. So like they create a lot of damage, they cause a lot of problems, and this is completely downplayed. This is actually another relevant subject related to this. So I also had another symptom that was explained as the symptom of depression, which was actually caused by the medication I was using. So this is just such a good example of how broken the system is. So I'm prescribed medication to treat depression, which doesn't treat depression or symptoms of depression really effectively. They're not that great at that. But then these medications cause some side effects that cause some other symptoms. And on top of that, I also have other brain symptoms that are caused by something completely different, which is not addressed. But then everything is explained as symptom of depression. But depression in the first place is not even a proper diagnosis. It's not even a proper illness. So Trintellix was the medication I was switched to later on, and it seemed to be the only medication that made some difference in my depression symptoms, but it caused sexual dysfunction, and I also still had my brain fog, and I also had disrupted sleep because of it. So again, one of the times I went back to my doctor, I said, yeah, this medication seems to be working better than the other one I was on, but it's giving me sexual side effects. And again, my doctor said, well, people with depression usually, one of the things that go away is the libido. And he said, yeah, that's a known symptom of depression. What I'm trying to say is that there's a huge problem here. So, and this just clearly shows the core issue with how psychiatry is being practiced right now. When you have the wrong causes, every symptom you experience is explained as coming from that cause. The depression, let's say, is this thing where, it causes so many symptoms. In reality, the reason why this mysterious disease called depression causes so many unrelated symptoms, it's because it's not depression that's causing it. It's the brain being in crisis, and that's why you're seeing all these different symptoms. Whatever symptom you experience after getting a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, all those symptoms are very typically explained as the symptom of that diagnosed disorder. But in reality, sometimes these symptoms are caused by the medications that are used to treat the so-called disorder. And sometimes the symptoms are caused by something entirely different, like food sensitivities that have an effect on the brain. And the depressive symptoms themselves are actually caused by a major problem in the brain that now I'm treating with the ketogenic diet, because the root cause problem, the only root cause problem, is that the brain is in an energy crisis. The brain isn't working properly because the cells in your brain are not functioning properly, and that causes symptoms of depression. And unfortunately, medications, first of all, are not great at treating that, and they actually also cause a bunch of other issues because of the side effect profiles. And this whole thing is just so backwards, and it just really, it's scary, and it's really infuriating that psychiatric medication as the major treatment of this so-called illness causes so many problems, and then it's prescribed with such casualness. Yeah, this is just a good example of how things are just backwards in the way psychiatry is being practiced right now. Whatever symptom you have, if you have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder that's in DSM, that symptom is explained as the symptom of depression. And that just prevents you from investigating that symptom. But also, what I'm now realizing, the way it needs to be seen is that my brain was in a crisis. My brain wasn't functioning because of a variety of different reasons, and depression was a symptom of that, and brain fog was another symptom of that. And then one big cause of the brain dysfunction I was having was the foods I was eating. The relationship is completely the reverse. Yeah, I wasn't having those symptoms because I had depression. I was having symptoms of depression and brain fog because my brain was not functioning properly. And one of the big reasons my brain wasn't functioning properly was because I was feeding it the wrong types of foods. As long as psychiatry is practiced this way, the way it's practiced now conventionally, you have this diagnosis that's not even a diagnosis, it's just a cluster of symptoms. But then that cluster of symptoms is taken as some sort of a disease that that explains some other symptoms. But then the treatment that they use, which is medication, they create more problems than they solve typically. And that's why the whole thing changes when we see these symptoms as a result of a brain energy problem and brain energy metabolism problem. And then we look at what affects brain metabolism. So it's what we eat is a big part of it. The sleep is a big part of it. And whether we exercise or not is a big part of it. Of course, our past experiences is a big part of it. But when we have the correct understanding of the root cause, then we wouldn't say things like, oh, your brain fog is caused by depression, or your sexual side effect is caused by depression. We would have a better understanding of the symptoms and what may be the true causes of those symptoms. So in my case, the biggest root cause of my brain fog was my food sensitivity to many of the foods that I never suspected before. The root cause for my biggest depressive symptoms were Actually, I'm very carb sensitive, and my metabolism doesn't do a good job of utilizing carbohydrates for energy. So my system has issues with processing carbohydrates to drive energy from them. So that's why when I switched to the keto diet, suddenly I got my energy back and my depression symptoms lifted, because now I'm able to drive energy from my food. Whereas before, when I was eating balanced diet with standard amounts of carbs in it, I wasn't able to drive energy from my foods, and my brain was literally not working because of it. And one thing I have to clarify is that this in no way means that I don't believe depression exists. Depression is real, and I lived it. So I was depressed for a decade. So the only difference is that instead of calling my illness major depressive disorder, I would now describe it as a brain metabolism disorder. And why this shift is important? Because the moment I shifted my view on what I'm treating, all the treatments started working. So when you shift your view to seeing it as a brain metabolism problem, you then start realizing, okay, how does metabolism work? How does brain metabolism work? How do your cells work? And then what kind of symptoms can present when you have dysfunctions in certain areas. So, for example, food sensitivities cause a lot of inflammation, and an inflammation causes brain fog. And then when I discovered this link, I realized when I take out the foods that I'm sensitive to, I don't have brain fog anymore. So then suddenly I have all these treatments that actually work, as opposed to 10 years of honestly trying kind of random things that didn't work at all. They didn't touch my symptoms. So that's the big shift. It's just not a matter of vocabulary, or like a matter of naming things differently, or a matter of advocating a certain ideological view. It's just a matter of when you start putting the causes and the symptoms in their proper place, you start treating things. And I describe what I'm doing right now as a treatment. I'm not describing it as suddenly I don't have any brain problems. I don't see it that way. It's still something I need to treat using lifestyle changes, including diet, including sleep, and including exercise.